ámbitos, ¿no? Hoy nos centramos más en el sector nuestro que representamos. Al final, el sector del packaging, como explicó también ayer Artur, es un sector muy transversal. Y hoy hablaremos, pues eso, de sostenibilidad, legislación, tendencias del consumidor. Todo este programa lo hemos preparado según las necesidades que nos habéis ido trasladando o hemos ido viendo que hay necesidad. Y también que sepáis que estamos abiertos a realizar diferentes proyectos de innovación. Si tenéis ideas, tenéis proyectos que queréis tirar adelante, no sabéis cómo, pues estamos aquí para daros soporte. Y sin más, ahora tenemos... también deciros que este programa lo vamos a realizar en castellano y en inglés porque tenemos ponentes muy variados. Tenemos un total de 5 ponencias y una mesa redonda al final de la jornada. Y sin más, voy a presentar nuestro primer ponente. Sorry, I will present him in English because it's Adam from Smithers Pira. He's going to do a very brief and very big, how to say, help me, Adam.
Thank you. So I'm going to give a talk putting the packaging industry into context and give a global overview of the market and the main trends.
Yes, perfect. So let's go on and thank you to be you here today. And yes, please, all of you, if you have some questions, we will ask to him after his presentation. So use the chat on the Zoom, and we collect these questions, and we'll discuss about it after your presentation. Thank you, Adam, and go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Great to be speaking with you all. And as mentioned, I'm looking to give a presentation on the packaging industry and specifically on the impact of COVID-19. What has happened this year, how it has impacted on the industry, and where I see the industry heading. So my name's Adam Page. I'm the Global Director of Research and Reports at Smithers. I oversee the market report business. So I'm doing a lot of market research. I'm looking at a lot of market data, and I'm speaking with many, many people across the packaging industry to get this insight, helped out by a large research team of subject matter experts. And if you don't know about Smithers, we've been around for 80 years. We do package testing, we do market reports, consultancy. So we're very much part of the packaging industry, and that's where we come with our perspective. So what I wanted to do in this presentation this morning is start off with a market overview. So I want to talk about the market size, the splits between different packaging formats and use markets and geographies, and how we see what has happened to the market this year and where we see the market going. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the key drivers and trends. So again, how has COVID impacted on packaging, specifically what's happening and why is it happening? And then I'm going to finish by saying where we think the packaging industry is going, and maybe some of the opportunities and threats for the packaging industry. So hopefully this will be a very interesting talk, and as I say, happy to answer any questions as we go through. So just to start off, this has been the big story. There's obviously been a big human impact, but there's also been an economic impact that we've all seen and witnessed. There's been issues with trade. There has been a backlash to a degree to globalization. Supply chains have come under scrutiny. What's particularly interesting about what we're seeing in the market is actually some businesses are as busy as before. And this is a very interesting story about the resilience of the packaging industry itself. And packaging has become a bit of a hero. Packaging has got a great story to tell. And many businesses are actually as busy as they ever have been. Looking across the board, some other industries, airlines, automotive, have been completely disrupted, and it's going to be interesting to see if they will recover in the form that they had before COVID. The other interesting thing, and you'll see this as we go through the presentation, is how COVID has accelerated the pre-existing trends. So I think when we look at the trends that I'm going to go through, there's not many of these trends that are completely new, completely disruptive. They were all there previously, and COVID has maybe impacted on the packaging industry, and maybe we've experienced 3 years of change in 3 months, and that's certainly how it feels for many packaging converters and brand owners. So in order to understand the impact on the packaging industry, we did some economic modeling to start with. So we already had market data for the packaging industry. We sized the market, as I mentioned. We're measuring growth, we're looking at the market. But this year is a year unlike anything else that anyone's ever experienced. And we realized that we needed to refresh our data. So there's a lot of detail here, not expecting everyone to kind of go through this detail line by line, but in summary, we did 3 scenarios. We assumed that there would be a mild impact, that a vaccine would be found quickly, that the industry would return quickly. We did another scenario at the end of the spectrum that was much more pessimistic, that assumed a much longer recession, that assumed a vaccine wouldn't be found for a very long time. And then we did a scenario in the middle, and that's the one that I'm going to focus on. And that's all the data that we're going to look at today, is the likely or probable scenario, which is something in the middle, which is a downturn, which will be that demand will pick up a little bit as we kind of get through the year. And so that middle scenario is a scenario that we're using for these slides. So these slides here show the global packaging market. And what's interesting, as we did our modeling, as I say, we use IMF economic data and a robust methodology using subject matter experts and solid research to size these markets. And what's really interesting is that in all 3 scenarios, there is definitely a decline across the board in the packaging market. At the same time, we're also forecasting growth looking ahead over the next kind of 4 or 5 years. That's because we see a lot of short-term disruption and uncertainty. That is also what we are hearing when we're talking to the industry. It's what we're seeing. It's what the research is showing. At the same time, the packaging industry has a very good story to tell. It plays a very important role in the distribution of goods. Consumers, in the end, they need to buy food, and they want drink and personal care, and very important goods are being distributed via packaging. So it's an industry that tends to not suffer too badly during recessions. And we've seen that before when we looked at our data for 2008, 2009, and that recession. So we're seeing a dip. And if we look at the probable scenario, we see a decline of something like 6.6% for this year. But looking ahead, it's a brighter story, and the outlook is more positive, and we can see a degree of growth over the next few years. And it's a similar story across the board. So this chart is showing the split of the global packaging market, split by substrate. we can see going across 2019, we can see a dip in most markets for 2020, and then we can see the growth going ahead to 2024. There is some interesting stories within this, especially thinking about the impact of COVID-19. And one of them is that the spike in demand for metal cans. That was an interesting story, because with the lockdown and with consumers suddenly being disrupted and not being able to kind of purchase goods and wanting to stockpile, metal cans came back into favor. There is right now a run on metal packaging that is almost outstripping supply in some markets, as packaging converters are kind of moving and scrambling to kind of get new lines kind of up and running. Again, in metal, there was a demand for beverage cans and new product launches in kind of metal. So while the market overall might be seeing a slight dip, there was certainly some kind of bright spots for that market. The other interesting thing, and we'll kind of see it as we go through the slides, is the battle between plastic and paper. And the trend pre-COVID was for brand owners to be thinking about paper and board, an anti-plastic sentiment. Brand owners are now pausing and reflecting as a result of COVID, and there are some questions about that move, and they are reflecting and thinking about it, and which is very interesting. And we'll see that as we come on to some of the sustainability trends later. If I look at the split geographically, again, similar story: disruption, decline in most markets, 2020, picking up in 2024. I always find this a very interesting chart, because it's easy to forget about the size of the market in Asia, and how Asia has been growing, powered by China and the Chinese economy. When we talk about opportunities, particularly when we're talking to European-based suppliers and converters, it's easy to focus on Europe or on Eastern Europe, but there are many global opportunities out there, and this is a kind of an interesting reflection of that, and about how there are kind of opportunities across the board. Again, Middle East, Africa, these are, and South and Central America, these are all markets that are worth thinking about and should be kind of considered in any strategic planning. So that was a brief overview of what's happening on the global stage. And now what I want to do is look at the underlying key drivers and trends and what's happening as a result of COVID. So certainly we're in the new normal, and things are very strange in 2020, and we're seeing lots of things that we probably never thought we would see in our lifetime. At the same time, these underlying trends that are there are being accelerated. So when I talk to brand owners, some of them are telling me these things. They're telling me that sustainability is still having a bigger impact than COVID in some markets. Brand owners are telling me that maybe plastic is emerging as a hero. We're seeing the need for hygiene, and consumers are appreciating the value of hygiene and safety and security. And maybe consumers are reflecting also and thinking about their priorities, and again, what this means for packaging. And supply chain disruption has been a big story in 2020. We've seen it in empty shelves, we've seen it in panic buying and stockpiling. This is causing a reflection and a pause and a consideration that maybe supply chains should be more local and less global for certain products and in certain markets. So now I want to dive into some of these trends in more detail. This is a great table that we've put together. in discussions with many industry experts, with suppliers, converters, brand owners, retailers. And what we're seeing here, and what this chart is showing, are some of the biggest trends in the packaging market, and specifically what the impact is on the 5 main packaging substrates: flexible plastic packaging, rigids, paper and board, metal and glass, and also how things are changing in respect of the impact of COVID. So if we take the first one, and what I want to do is provide this at a high level overview first, and then we're going to dive into some of these trends in more detail. But if I take a look at sustainability first, sustainability is top of the agenda, without a doubt, for brand owners and retailers. There is the circular economy. There is this is a real trend. It is not a fad. It's happening. Brand owners and retailers are now planning and making commitments for 2025 and beyond that require significant changes to their packaging. This is, and as we can see here from this chart, relatively bad news if you are a flexible packaging converter and rigid plastic packaging converter, because of this anti-plastic sentiment driven by regulatory concerns or changes and concerns around recyclability, and again in North America and in Europe as well, and the drive as part of this to replace multi-material laminates. And we put that as with the arrogant down because, again, there is this pause and reflection that has taken place this year. So that is one of the big impacts has been for companies, for businesses to take this time to pause and to reflect, to look at what is happening in the world, to see the uncertainty, and to give that some time, and to think about the speed at which they were previously progressing, and do they want to kind of go in those directions. So again, we're still seeing sustainability as one of the biggest drivers for change in the packaging industry. That's not going to change, that's real, but maybe some of the nuance or some of the specific changes in some of the specific sectors might not happen at the pace now that we previously thought. Looking down quickly, we can see similar patterns. So consumer trends continue to be important, and consumer drivers for freshness and convenience will continue to impact on the packaging industry. Regulatory drivers and trends are a big driver, and I have some interesting data to kind of show on that. Again, plastic is being targeted by these regulatory changes, taxes as well, moves against single-use plastic. Some of that is slowing down slightly as a result of COVID, but that underlying trend is still there. The other big disruptor that we've all experienced is e-commerce, the rise of Amazon, the rise of buying online. That was a trend that existed before COVID. And there's no doubt at all, and I have the data to show in a moment, that this has been accelerated and fundamentally changed as a result of COVID, and consumers are now buying more online, are comfortable buying online, and this seems to be a real shift in behavior and a real shift in pattern and of demand, and it's not something that's going to go back. And packaging converters have a big opportunity to develop e-commerce friendly packaging, frustration-free packaging in Amazon's terms, because that trend is not going away, and brands and upstart brands and craft brands are taking advantage of this by developing products that are only sold online now, and are directly targeting consumers and are cutting out the high street shops. The last one on the list is always there, technology and innovation. And this is actually something that is green and positive for flexible packaging and for rigid plastic packaging. And that's because suppliers and converters are not going to sit on their hands, and they're not going to allow the paper and board, carton and corrugated industries to take their business away from them. They are actively investing and developing mono-material packaging, recyclability, or recyclable coatings and recyclable packaging, investing in chemical recycling and many new disruptive technologies. So there is a lot going on in that space. So that was a brief overview of the main trends. I want to dive into some of these in a bit more detail now. So I mentioned sustainability. It's top of the agenda for brand owners who are buying into the circular economy thinking and ideas. They are pushing for and driving towards more recyclable content, using more post-consumer recycled content and waste. They have generally pushed lightweighting almost as far as it can go. And so now they are looking for new ways to improve the environmental credentials of their packaging, to improve the recyclability of their packaging. The Holy Grail is a barrier, is a material with barrier properties that is recyclable, that is mono-material. And that is something that many companies are actively working on. We have seen announcements, and we will continue to see new announcements as companies are developing that space. That space is very competitive, and there is a lot of interesting work going on. And if you're not aware of CFlex, that is a group that is worth looking at, because they are very active, and there is a lot of interesting information and data and innovations coming out of that group. Whilst some states and countries in Europe and regions are kind of banning single-use plastic, one of the interesting things was how some of that was delayed in order to, really because of COVID. So in the UK, the ban that was scheduled for May was delayed until October 2020. And in the US, there were some states that also postponed the enactment of statewide plastic bag bans. So the bans are still coming. There is still the backlash against single-use plastic, but COVID, in terms of its impact, has just slowed that down a bit. I think in reflection that consumers are valuing safety and hygiene, and that the industry can only withstand so much disruption in such a short space of time. And looking ahead, there is a clear timeline for packaging regulations that are coming into force. And many brand owners and retailers have made strong commitments to adapt and to evolve their packaging in line with the expected timeline for packaging regulations. So again, 2025 is a big year for many brand owners, because they have made commitments to make fundamental and quite disruptive and quite radical changes to their packaging. And what's interesting is often the technology doesn't yet exist that would allow that change to happen in the expected way, in the usual way. And this is driving a lot of investment in innovation and technology. And I think that's one of the reasons why the packaging industry is such an exciting place at the moment, is because there is so much focus on innovation and technology, driven by the real sustainability and recyclability agenda. And if we dive even more into the details, and this is some data from one of our reports on the climate regulations and the impact on packaging, there is a whole range and network of regulation and legislation that is coming into place globally that is not consistent, that by region or even country by country, that requires a lot of careful attention. So this is, again, something that packaging converters need to consider, brand owners too, is that this is not a simple question. There is multiple impacts on the regulations and legislation that's coming in. Everything to do with waste management, EPR and taxation, and going through to packaging design, including food contact, recyclability, labeling, biodegradability, reusability. So it's fundamental for any supplier or packaging converter or brand owner to have a clear picture of the markets that they are in and the geographies that they are in, the regulatory landscape for the markets that they are in, what is happening now, but what's also likely to happen over the next few years, and how specifically that is going to impact on their business. Because this change is happening, and it's happening at quite a pace. And to be ready by 2025, brand owners have to make decisions in the next few years. So that doesn't leave a lot of time. I mentioned supply chain disruption. This is something that we all saw, and we saw it either ourselves when we went to the shops, or we saw it on the news. Empty shelves are unsettling for everyone, particularly for consumers. There was a change of behavior in terms of stockpiling and in terms of panic buying. And I mentioned how that was, to a degree, kind of good news for markets like metal packaging and metal cans. How this is impacted on packaging is that the industry has realized that the supply chains that they had were not as robust as predicted. The globalized supply chain wasn't able to withstand so many shocks in such a short space of time. And that led to the empty shelves and the consumer concerns. Now there is the thinking that maybe there is a need to move to more local suppliers and local networks and a more local supply chain, even if there is a cost, even if it becomes more expensive. Food safety is still top of mind for consumers as well. So again, seeing this, I think has kind of is changing consumers' behavior, willingness to maybe shop online, thinking about hygiene and safety, and all this is going hand in hand, and is one of the disruptive impacts and shocks from 2020 that we'll see impact on the industry going forwards. What's interesting is actually there's two types of brands now. There are the major brands, and they experienced significant supply chain disruption, and they are rethinking how they source the materials that they need in order to operate successfully. On the other hand, there are the smaller brands, upstart brands, craft brands, that are actually using this disruption in order to speak directly to consumers. They are much more comfortable selling directly online, and they do not have a rule book for how they work. They just need the products that they need in place quickly, and they are willing to pay for it. And that is creating new opportunities if you are a packaging supplier. If you can find the craft brands, and if you can give them what they want, they are a very good market, and that is something that's very interesting for packaging converters to explore. These craft brands are exploiting the changes in e-commerce that I mentioned before. Fascinating chart here that we can see in terms of, in the US, the e-commerce penetration, and we can see steady line, steady growth, and then this huge spike in 2020. Now, e-commerce means additional packaging because you have the primary packaging for the product itself, and there is a desire for the unboxing experience for that packaging to be attractive. It's got to be an experience when it kind of lands on the and it gets directly to the consumer. But there is also a need for secondary packaging to allow the product to arrive safely through a longer, sometimes more complex distribution chain. As I say, the demand for e-commerce has certainly been accelerated by COVID. E-commerce is one of the disruptive factors in itself that's transforming the supply chain. Manufacturers are scrambling and moving quickly to kind of understand how e-commerce is impacting on their business and is impacting on the type of packaging that is required. There is still a need for sustainability here, but there's also a need for returnability, for protection, for traceability and security, and for that unboxing experience and differentiation that is particularly attractive to the craft brands as well. Another trend is, and again, this has been documented before, but is the packaging formats replacing other formats and the adoption of new formats. So the story has been how flexible packaging has been replacing glass bottles and jars and metal packaging. Again, this is still continuing. This is still kind of happening where pouches in particular have been targeting many sectors. Pouches bring many benefits in terms of lightweighting. Flexible packaging is benefiting from the drive towards e-commerce because there's less likely to be damage. On the other hand, in terms of the impact of the changes that we've seen this year, pouches are a multi-material product which are difficult to recycle. So again, there is this pushback, there's this change, and on the one hand, if you're involved in pouch manufacturing, there is a lot of innovation going on for these mono materials with the barrier properties that are recyclable. On the other hand, if you're involved in maybe cartons or other packaging materials, there's that opportunity to push back on the growth that pouches have experienced over the last 10, 15 years. Consumers are in, this is a fascinating topic because no one's really sure whether the changes that we've seen this year in terms of consumer behavior are a fad or whether they are permanent. And it seems as though there's still going to be fundamentals at play. So consumers are cost conscious, they want convenience, they want functionality such as ease of use, easy opening, resealability, and there are general trends in the background for things like healthy living, and that chimes with the drive for sustainability and being more environmentally conscious. This is something that must always be at the heart of any business planning: is who are your consumers, how are they changing, how are they going to react, what do they want? There are some fundamentals here in terms of the move towards e-commerce and buying online, which doesn't look like that is going to go back. And the environmentally conscious consumer who is looking to make decisions based on environmental impact and feeling good and healthy living, which again plays to the strengths of packaging formats which can demonstrate their sustainability credentials. So I mentioned some of those convenience attributes that come from innovative packaging formats. Brand owners and retailers are continuing to invest and develop packaging that adds value. So whether it is portion control and smaller portion sizes, whether it's portability and flexibility and allowing the consumer to use the product in different places, whether it's easy open functions, and of course, anything around extended shelf life. So again, we saw that with the behavior of the stockpiling and consumers valuing or targeting food products with a naturally kind of longer shelf life and gravitating towards the metal can, moving towards kind of goods like pastas and things like that. So if packaging can kind of continue to bring those functions of extended shelf life whilst having the environmental credentials, so again, the barrier property with the with the mono-material for easy recycling, then that is an attractive proposition for brand owners. And then there's another one here, which again links to e-commerce and it links to supply chain disruption, and that is the printing of packaging. Digital print is growing. It is still only a small proportion of the total packaging market. It's big in labels, and it has become big in corrugated. And now the digital print industry, the machinery companies, inks, they are now looking at markets like flexibles as the next big market for them because the technology is there or thereabouts. Digital print allows shorter runs, which allows more flexibility in the supply chain. And digital print appeals to the craft brands that I mentioned earlier, who are doing shorter runs of their products and who don't have big inventory stores and who just want to get the product to market as quickly as possible. So again, there is a lot going on in terms of inkjet and inkjet technology that is impacting on flexibility, shorter runs, driven by user demand, but also, as I say, because the technology is there and is largely proven, and is something that converters are looking at as ways to tackle and get into new markets. So that was my overview of the market. And then I talked about in detail all of the drivers and trends. So I just want to finish by trying to summarize what this research is kind of talking to us about. So there's certainly kind of new business models that are emerging. Driven by e-commerce is big data, industry 4.0. This is, as the world becomes more digital, there's a richer source of data available and more insight about consumers that is leading to better decisions and faster reaction times, and is disrupting some of the previous ways that companies were working. There's going to be developments across the supply chain. There's going to be new materials. There's going to be new technologies and innovations. I didn't really talk about things like smart packaging, but there's going to be additional functionality and links between this rich information source and what the smart packaging can either bring to the converter brand owner in terms of information or functionality to the consumer. And there'll be new innovations around packaging design. So not just digital print, but just in terms of these mono materials that are for easier recycling, these are going to change packaging formats, packaging designs. And brand owners and retailers still have fundamental demands. You know, they are always looking for low-cost solutions. They are pushing in terms of lighter weight. There is a need for barrier properties. They want to increase the shelf life of their products. They want shelf appeal and shelf impact. So again, many innovative packaging products and formats can offer that shelf appeal. And that is one of the reasons for the success story of stand-up pouches over the last 10, 15 years. But at the same time, brand owners and retailers have real sustainability goals that are driving decision-making and will disrupt the packaging industry. And again, whilst pouches have had a good run for 10 to 15 years, if brand owners can't get the recyclability and sustainability goals from pouches, they will go elsewhere. So that is driving innovation and driving technology developments. Final thoughts, some big questions for everyone. Fundamentally, this change is real. These disruptions are happening. How are they impacting on your business, in your segment, in your geography, in your market? As I say, packaging is resilient and has shown that in previous downturns and in previous recessions. And there's an exciting story here about packaging as the hero, and packaging bringing food and other essential items to consumers in times of crisis. And that is a great story. As this new normal plays out, and some industries are disrupted beyond recognition, we've all got to ask ourselves, what does this mean, and how will this impact on me and my business? And do I have the data and the insight in order to kind of navigate the next few years? So thank you for listening, and I hope you found that informative and enlightening. And I'll be very curious to see if you have any questions.
Hi, Adam. Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I think that we have a big overview about packaging sector and what is going to be, no? And we have several questions. I will read some questions that we have on the chat. One is from Kim Montané. He said, "Are global FCMG reviving procurement networking from strongly centralized to strictly local supply opportunities?" I don't know if it's. He asked at the beginning of your presentation about supply opportunities. What are the global? Yeah, you have some answer about it.
Yes. So there is a supply chain disruption, and there is a move away from, or there is thinking about the move from globalization to more local kind of markets. That will build resilience and make the supply chains more robust. There is an expectation or an understanding it might be more expensive to do that, but it leads to a more resilient business. So that will lead to opportunities in local markets. That is something that companies should be thinking about, is the local markets that they're in, and how can they adapt to that change, and how can they offer something for that local market.
Great, because the local market, I think, and nowadays it's coming more important, because the pandemic starts to lock some places that we can go. So we have to rethink, I think, about the markets and start to be more local. We know that it's difficult on packaging because it's very global, and more of the companies that we have here are global. But yes, to start to be more focused on local places will be good. We have another question, and Mark asked, how do you see the trends and intelligent packaging? Is the is there a real interest in smart labels, traceability? I have to say that in the packaging cluster, we are doing a project about it with some companies involved with smart labels in the wine sector. But maybe you can have more information about these trends. That
yeah. So there is interest in smart packaging. There is interest in intelligent packaging. So I'm not surprised that in your packaging cluster you're doing a project on this, because it is something that is of real interest. The technology has been there for a while. So we all heard about RFID tags and labels, and we all heard about kind of smart labels. The technology has been there, but it's been almost looking for, it's been seeking an application. It's been seeking the profitable market or opportunity. And that's something that the retailers and brand owners haven't quite kind of figured out, is what that opportunity is and what that kind of opportunity looks like. And I think if you think about the supply chain disruption, that could be the driver for more investment in logistics and more investment in what's going on in the supply chain, that could lead to more demand for intelligent packaging. That, combined with big data and industry 4.0 and digitization that is also happening in many industries, is likely to be a driver and a demand, or create a demand for more intelligent packaging.
Great. So we have two more questions. Another from Kim again. he was very interested on your presentation, I think.
Oh, good.
Yeah. He asked about which trend do you think will be stronger, developing recycling technologies to treat recycling existing materials, or their launch of new materials designed for a circular economy requirements?
Yeah, that's
the trends of recycling. No, he was asking about that.
Yeah.
For us, I think
that's a great question. That's a great question. We could probably do a whole new presentation just on that topic. But
just to be brief, because we have two more questions, and then
so there's going to be a lot of developments going on in recyclable materials and mono materials that are easier to recycle. So that in my short answer is that's where it's at, is the development of those easily recyclable materials. I don't think I talked about chemical recycling, but that's a very hot technology that is that is got a bit of a buzz, and people are talking about. So, but I didn't talk about that in this presentation. But have a look at chemical recycling.
Yes, it will be a big issue, and also a big opportunity on business in this topic. And for just to be ending on this presentation, Adria from MarketAd asked questions regarding about mega trends, anti-plastics, sustainability. We don't talk about sustainability, a lot of sustainability in this presentation, but he asked about silver lining of flexibility and rigid plastic converse. Although the trends may seem generally negative for them, isn't it a driver of transformation which those players can dump or are already dumping into focusing on? So as I read, the question is which kind of materials we are going to have in the future, in a few in a short time, like, because he put monoplastics, 100% recyclability materials. So which kind of trends you said in the presentation, but maybe we can.
So it's not as simple. There is an anti-plastic sentiment that is negative, but it's not as simple as just being as saying, well, plastic will disappear and paper will replace it. There is an opportunity for easily recyclable plastics using a single mono material, or using other technologies that can solve some of these issues and problems that brand owners are committed to solving before 2025. So it's not black and white. It's not pro paper and anti-plastic. There is a lot of nuance and a lot of interesting innovation that's happening. But that recyclability issue must be solved with whatever solution emerges.
Great. So just to finish, if you want to say like some less briefly words to be positive on our sector and keep going.
Well, in terms of the topic, I mean, there has been, since I started working on this presentation, there has been some positive news around vaccines and things. And you think, well, hopefully things will get back to normal, but I don't think that things will get back to as they were before. I think, and again, from speaking to people in the industry, we've seen 5 years of change in 5 months. It's been incredible, the pace of change, but packaging has shown that it's resilient and that it's necessary, and that consumers need and want great packaging to solve their problems. And there are many opportunities here. There are many growth opportunities. There are many new opportunities around technologies and markets. And I think forums like this, where we all are today, and the work of groups like the Packaging Cluster and works like Smithers helps to bring those forward and share ideas, because there's lots to talk about and there's lots to think about. And so while the topic might seem gloomy, there are bright spots and there are things that are worth investing in.
Thank you, Adam.